Take a breath. Take a deep breath. 1, 2.
Welcome to a unique competition developed by Land Rover to test teams from its dealerships on their product knowledge as well as the physical and mental capacity needed to live an active outdoor lifestyle. This is Land Rover TReK 96. Atlanta, Georgia, home of the Olympics and the World Series. Sporting fans have come to know the Georgia capital well in '96, but we've headed away from the big city 45 minutes east to a community named for its warm hospitality, Social Circle, Georgia. Today, it plays host to the championship round of Land Rover TReK 96. Hello again, everyone. I'm Bob Varsha, along with Bill Baker, Vice President of Corporate Communications for Land Rover North America. Welcome to a breezy day in North Georgia and an event that defines the spirit of motorsports, better than anything else that I can think of. The Land Rover TReK matches teams of Land Rover personnel from across the country in a series of special tasks that test not only their knowledge of Land Rover products, but their ability to use the incredible capabilities of these machines.
By training our center personnel and our Land Rover dealership personnel in product knowledge, how to use the product, the gear that goes with it to really fit into the four-wheel drive lifestyle, we're able to better serve our customers' needs, and we think that that'll give us a better angle on the marketplace. These people are going to take their enthusiasm back into the dealership, and then that will be, I think, infectious to the consumer.
Now, we have 5 teams in our championship round from across North America. 31 teams actually came here to Georgia to vie for the right to compete in these finals. Here's Jeremy Hart with how those 31 were winnowed down to our championship 5.
Bob, thanks very much. Already the competitors have been through a lot before they got to this final. There have been 5 days of preliminary trials, as you say. Teams have come from all over North America to compete, from Canada, from the Southwest, the Northwest, the Northeast, but first of all, from the Southeast. The local teams, if you like, 2 in particular from Atlanta. But it was Team North Point who really stole that first day.
It took a lot of stamina last time, but we made it. We just want to be consistent in all the events. We've put the win in the last one behind us and just focusing on this one today.
The team, Paul Zeman, David Crute and Brian Adams. So they're the ones to watch out for from the Southeast. On the second day, it was still hot, and teams came down from the northeast, and they weren't really used to the hot temperatures, but still they performed very well. Land Rover Glen Cove in particular were the best. They won 3 out of the 9 special events. They also came second 4 times, which gave them the winning position on day 2 and a place in today's final. Their team, Phil Schaff, Matt Frederico, and Kevin Sweeney. Definitely ones to watch out for, but they might be a bit weak in the physical events like the triathlon.
Well, we're going to stick together as a team, and we're going to plug along, be consistent in all the events. It's not going to be winning every one that takes it, just the consistency.
Day 3, and teams from the Northwest made the long trek down to Atlanta. It was still hot. They'd come the furthest, but they were very well prepared. The team from Land Rover Denver East were looking very strong. And today, possibly, if it's not Land Rover North Point, they are the favourites. They won 4 events, but they were never lower than 3rd on any others. So overall, very, very strong. Their team, Craig Dennis, Greg Winch, a very apt name for an off-roader, and Greg Weiler. What have you done to train in the last week?
We did a lot of canoeing, did a lot of running, and basically just polished up on all the other skills that we needed to do.
By day 4, it was beginning to feel a little bit like Groundhog Day for those of us who were here for the whole week. One set of teams would leave, another set would come in. For day 4, those from the Southwest. The staff feeling a little jaded, but they were feeling very strong, so we had to power through and help them to their moment of glory on the finals. The team from San Diego, not so good on the off-roading, but very strong on everything else, so they made it through, knocking everybody else to one side. Their team, Bob Smith, Larry Suarez, and Sean Lawler. You know, Canadians have a way of injecting a sense of humour, a bit of bravado into everything, and with the staff feeling really quite tired by the 5th day, the teams came down from the border from as far west as Calgary and from as far east as Quebec City. There was French spoken. There was a sense of end of term, if you like, in these first heats. It was the team, though, from Lawrence Park Motors in Toronto, Ontario, who were strongest. They fought the closest fight of all week against their compatriots from Canada. The team from Lawrence Park Motors, Russell George, Colin Smith, and Brad Domasu. So, Bob, that's the lineup for this Land Rover TReK 96 final. The top 5 Land Rover dealer teams from North America competing in this, the toughest dealer competition anywhere in the world. Let's see who wins.
All right, thank you, Jeremy. Incidentally, Jeremy Hart, whom we'll be hearing from throughout the day, has served as a color analyst on the Camel Trophy Adventure, an event very similar to what you're going to see here today. We'll take a short break, and when we return, we'll take you back to early morning. There's no sleeping in on Championship Day. Land Rover TReK 96 is brought to you by Land Rover, the world 4x4. Welcome back to Little Creek Farms in Social Circle, Georgia. Bob Varsha alongside Bill Baker as we bring you the TReK 96 Championship. 5 three-man teams from different regions of the U.S. and Canada have qualified for today's championship, and here they are. A total of 9 events make up this day-long competition. As you can see, it's a full test of mind and body, driving events as well as a triathlon coming up later in the day. Well, we mentioned earlier that the concept of the TReK is based on the Camel Trophy Adventure. How close is that similarity?
Well, that's right. Bob Burns, who's the TReK director,
ready to go?
also trains Camel Trophy competitors, but he's designed this course to be not quite as rigorous as the real Camel Trophy, but indeed a grueling test of physical and mental endurance.
Our first test, Land Rover Logic, and as you can see, Bill, it began well before dawn.
Yeah, imagine taking a college exam at 4:45 in the morning. These guys were being tested on their product knowledge, Land Rover history, time, speed, and distance rally math, as well as orienteering theory. And while they took the test here, back at the dealership, there was another team that had to take the identical test, and if both sides didn't get the questions right, it didn't count.
So in many ways, it's a concept of teamwork that spans the entirety of the dealership network in North America. And of course, each of the teams knew that it set the standard for the rest of the day.
7, a 14-gauge steel chassis uses lighter material than a 16-gauge steel chassis. False. 14 gauge is a heavier gauge than a 16 gauge.
When the results were tallied, they produced a tie between Pioneer Setters of San Diego and Land Rover Denver East. And then it was on to the first physical test of the day, the service drive.
Well, you might call this the world's slowest drag race, Bob. Running, winching, pushing, tire changing, air cleaner element replacement, and driving across a dark, wet field, uphill most of the way with a driver change en route.
Come on, Phil, come on! Come on! Sorry. That's good. Come on. The board is in the back, right? All right, way to go,
First across the line on the service drive, the team from Glen Cove, New York. Congratulations.
Thank you. It was a team effort, and we all did work as quick as possible. The hardest part was trying to find that wheel. It was way tucked in the woods. But we got it, and from then on, it was, all the way downhill from there, so we're first over the finish line.
We got it stuck on that. We were starting to get weak. Hit that rock, and we just couldn't get it past it.
With that, Land Rover Glen Cove took the service drive results, although the overall lead on cumulative points goes to Denver East, who finished third. Then on to our third test, orienteering.
Right, Bob. Orienteering is to find specific points over uneven ground using a map, a topographical map, and a compass. Now, in this case, the shortest distance between 2 points isn't necessarily a straight line because you have to account for gullies and ridges and trees and rocks. So you have to figure out the fastest way to get to the 6 points. That's Mac Barber, Camel Trophy veteran from 1994 across South America, who's from Macon, Georgia. The team members had to run in the dark and find these orange and white flags and then identify a part number, the Land Rover part number, and come back and report in.
Okay. Don't know if to touch it, am I? Square on yours. Davey, square on your parts. You got.
Go in. Come on. Come on. Let's go. Come on.
Let him in.
As you can see, tremendous camaraderie among the teammates, and that's emphasized in the Land Rover TReK. Land Rover North Point wins the orienteering competition, while Denver East, with another third-place finish, consolidates their lead over Pioneer Centers of San Diego. And then with the sun high in the sky, time for the autocross. Once again, here's Jeremy Hart.
Now the teams get their hands on the Land Rover Discoveries. They've done 3 tests already this morning, but this is the first of the off-road driving courses. It's the autocross, a mixture, if you like, of circuit racing and off-road driving, to go as fast as they can, but accurately as they can. There are 2 tracks they have to do, and each team member gets to drive each track once. The orange course, which is the one we're standing by here, is a little bit tighter than the yellow course, but on both, if they knock over one of these cones, it's a 5-second penalty. If they miss the gate completely, it's a 10-second penalty. So a fine balance between speed and precision driving.
Thank you, Jeremy. Speed and precision, exactly what Pioneer Centers of San Diego is striving for on their first run through the orange course. We'll be right back with autocross action as the Land Rover TReK 96 Championship Finals continue. Stay with us. Welcome back to Land Rover TReK 96. Bob Varsha along with Bill Baker. Jeremy Hart is in the field, and we are on test number 4 of 9.
We call it Land Rover Cross. It's autocross in the dirt. There are 2 mirror courses. The teams get to take a practice lap, and then each team member drives 2 laps at speed. The objective here is to go quickly, but don't hit the cones. If you hit a cone, you pick up a 5-second penalty. If you go out of the course, it's a 10-second penalty.
And as you saw, driver exchanges are required. Look at that low sun. That can make it difficult to maintain maximum speed without hitting those cones.
Well, that's right. You know, this course was designed to be run at speed without having to stop and back up. Unfortunately, there he picked up 5 seconds right there. Unfortunately, the tracks in the ground would mislead you as to the proper line you had to take. You had to read 2 cones ahead in order to set the car up and then turn the wheel as quickly as you could as you entered a gate 2 gates down from where you're going.
If you've ever tried this at your local performance driving school, imagine what it's like on the loose dirt and clay berms here at Little Creek Farm.
Well, there's a little strategy that a lesson that had to be learned, and that is when you're approaching a cone because you've gone out of course, do you stop and back up and take 8 or 9 or 10 seconds, or you just whack the thing and take a 5-second penalty?
Keep in mind, those fellas in the seats who aren't driving have an important function to play as well, assisting their team driver.
Yeah, I think there was a classic case of backseat driving and side seat driving here that really stretched the limits of team spirit.
You ride with team number 4 from North Point here in Atlanta, Georgia, trailing in the competition after 3 rounds, and there they struck a cone. That'll cost them.
And not only did they strike that one, I think they were trying to eliminate it.
Go, go, go.
The Discovery's got a 39-foot turning radius, and, you know, they're permanent 4-wheel drive. There's also a locking center differential, so there was a little fooling around to determine what was the best way to get through the course without pushing too much. Some teams locked the center differential, others kept it open, which did allow the rear end to come around a little bit better.
Team number 1, Denver East, having their problems right here. They are the leaders through 3 tests.
Now, they do a lot of off-roading out there. This particular crew takes customers on off-road days quite frequently, so I think they were really confident that they were going to do well at this, and they did practice the event.
Looks like great fun, and of course that too is a part of Land Rover TReK 96. We'll be back with the results of the Land Rover Cross in just a moment. Welcome back to Land Rover TReK 96. Bob Varsha and Bill Baker with you. Denver East picks up a victory in the Land Rover Cross. Once again, here's Jeremy Hart.
On the autocross, it was the team from Denver East who were quickest. Congratulations. What was the secret?
a heavy foot, quick hands and heavy foot.
Did you risk running down a lot of those cones to get good times?
Well, what we found out last week Wednesday was that backing up takes more time than it does just to simply run it over. So that's what we were doing if we got into that situation, was just go over it.
Well, certainly that strategy worked for Denver East. They are our overall leaders as we move into the second half of the competition, beginning with TReK trials and a very different kind of driving technique, Bill.
Well, you know, the autocross, you can make bolder moves and go a little bit faster. The trials is very, very precise, a much tighter course. You have to turn at exactly the right moment. You have to have just the right gear, and you have to have just the right momentum.
These, of course, are the driving techniques perfected to razor sharpness in Land Rover vehicles in the world-famous Camel Trophy adventure. Here's Bill to explain.
The Camel Trophy's been called the Olympics of four-wheel drive because it pits two-person teams from 20 different countries in a series of competitions that test physical strength and endurance, as well as the ability to solve problems and get along with each other. The adventure also involves a 1,000-kilometer drive across some of the most remote terrain in the world. During the last 17 years, it's been in Africa, Central and South America, Siberia, and the most remote areas on Pacific Islands. In order to survive the rigors of Camel Trophy, team members must possess tremendous amounts of physical and mental stamina. Every decision is vital. The wrong choice can result in the convoy moving only a few hundred meters in a day. Since 1980, 33 countries from 6 continents have fielded Camel Trophy teams. And it's not surprising that there are over 1 million applicants worldwide each year. Americans have been in the event continuously since 1987, when U.S. Camel Trophy coordinator Tom Collins and teammate Don Floyd made the first north-south crossing of Madagascar in a Range Rover. For the last 6 years, Land Rover Discoveries, similar to the ones used on TReK, have been the vehicles of choice. The next Camel Trophy takes place in Mongolia in May of '97, and the Stars and Stripes will be there once again.
The trials course is about 1/4 of a mile long, surrounded with 133 poles like this. If the teams hit a pole, that's a 5-second penalty. If they knock it over, it's a 10-second penalty. The thing to do is go for speed and also to try not to knock too many over. And he just knocked this one over behind me. That's 5 seconds, another 5 seconds, and he can hit a third one. Yes, another 5 seconds. 15 seconds on that one corner.
3. Thanks, Jeremy. Always right on top of the action. The Land Rover staff briefs our Land Rover Cross winners on this trials course. They were actually first off on the course this morning.
Yeah, that's Greg Winch, 28-year-old shop foreman behind the wheel. His hobby is off-roading, camping. He's the complete Colorado outdoorsman. And his touch is very, very good here. What we didn't do was show them how this can be run. So they had to figure it out on their own.
Keep in mind now, this is natural terrain. With the addition of the odd log bridge. And it is absolutely phenomenal what these vehicles can do, the angles that they can assume and still remain upright.
Well, that's where center of gravity and a full box perimeter chassis comes into play, as well as the aluminum body parts that Land Rovers feature. Notice how he keeps his thumbs outside the steering wheel. That's Craig Dennis driving now. He's a 34-year-old service manager at Land Rover Denver East. They're taught to keep the thumbs out of the steering wheel because in off-road situations, if you hit a boulder, you could spin the wheel and break your thumbs.
Once again, these are Land Rover dealership personnel from around the country, and there is a
5
fault.
points right there. Yeah, it's tough. You want to be so precise and not hit any of these poles, but the clock is ticking. What you don't want to do is bring that autocross technique of, well, I think I'll just barrel through here because there are so many more of these poles to hit, then that's 5 seconds every time you do. And if you knock it over, that's 10 seconds.
Land Rover TReK 96 will continue in a moment. Welcome back to Land Rover TReK 96 in Social Circle, Georgia, just outside of Atlanta, where the action continues in the trials competition.
Okay. Nice and easy. This has nothing to do with horsepower or speed or anything. This is just good articulation, good drive.
Well, those are the guys from Land Rover North Point. Their dealership is north of Atlanta, and they've got fans and family here. But the bottom line is, it doesn't matter where they're from. This team is just plain strong.
From our onboard camera, you can see just how close those penalty poles, if you will, are to the track itself, and how many of them there are.
Now the technique here, that's young Brian Adams, 22 years old, a parts support specialist behind the wheel. The technique here is to go downhill in first gear, and then just as you get to the bottom, you have to upshift so that you have power but not speed to the wheels for the climb out.
Nice. Nice.
As you can see, the vehicles are virtually never on straight and level ground.
These guys are going to try a little bit harder here than they didn't have much luck in Land Rover Cross, where they were the slowest of the territorial winners, but they did do much better there in the championship round. But it's such a temptation here as they enter what we came to call the Grand Canyon. The vehicles tilted over 20-25 degrees. The temptation is just to nail it and barrel through, but then you start collecting those 5- and 10-second penalties like there's no tomorrow.
Calls for incredible patience and focus. Notice how they folded back the side view mirror to avoid clipping the pole.
Yeah, and a little body English inside there by David Crute.
Way to go, team!
David Crute's an interesting story.
He is. David is 28 years old. He's a technician, and he's from England. He's from Newport Pagnell, where his father was a trimmer on the Aston Martin line. So he's got a feel for that English wool, leather, and walnut that sort of bespeaks the Land Rover vehicles.
Good job, guys. I'm in. Go, Bob.
Okay, here we go to Pioneer Centers of San Diego.
San Diego running a close second to Denver East at this point in the competition. North Point from Georgia, whom we saw a moment ago, are fifth in the competition.
That's Bob Smith, a 39-year-old technician working the gearbox. These are the new Land Rover Discovery XDs. The company's going to bring in about 250 of them for sale, just identical to this except with automatic transmission. The ones used on TReK have a 5-speed manual.
Belts, nice and easy. Belts.
And we should point out that before a vehicle can move at any stage of the competition, the driver and all of the passengers must be confirmed buckled in.
That's right. Safety was the primary consideration throughout the entire event. These guys, you know, the old red misting, they'd like to change seats, get behind the wheel and nail it, but you couldn't have somebody hanging out the door.
Nice job indeed. No wildly spinning wheels from any of our drivers here in the trials competition. After an extraordinary round of driving by everyone involved, victory went to the local favorites. Here's Jeremy Hart.
The team from North Point in Atlanta, the local team, seem to be virtually unbeatable at the moment. Guys, you probably don't know this, but you were quickest on the trials. Did you know that you'd gone fast?
We knew we'd gone pretty fast, but we hit quite a few of the poles, so we thought that'd knock our time back quite a bit. That's excellent. That's pretty good.
Now, you've had quite a few wins already this morning. Things are looking good, or is it too early to count your chickens?
It's too early to count.
Way too early.
One false move could blow us out everything, so just one task at a time for us right now.
Well, Team North Point sounding strong and confident, but they've got it right. We have a long way to go before we crown our champions at Land Rover TReK 96. Stand by for more from North Georgia. Back at Land Rover TReK 96, matching teams of Land Rover dealer personnel. But these are not folks who work at your standard auto dealership. Here's Bill with more.
Most of the competitors here for TReK work at Land Rover centers, which are designed to look more like hunting lodges or garden stores than car dealerships. The staff at the centers receive untraditional training. Participating in TReK testifies to that and is cross-functional. They know how to equip them for everything from trailer towing to major expeditions. A feature of each center is a demonstration course designed to show off the capabilities of the vehicles. Land Rover feels pretty strongly about its demonstration courses. Take a look at the $500,000 facility they built outside their national headquarters in Maryland. These folks are serious about four-wheel drive.
All right, thank you, Bill. With our helicopter-borne camera overhead, we move on to the on-time delivery test, also referred to as time, speed, distance. 3 variables that Jeremy Hart will tell us are vital to a good performance. Jeremy?
The on-time delivery course is the toughest off-road driving they'll have to do today. 3.5 miles through the forests here near Atlanta. They'll be following a diagrammatical tulip chart. The driver driving, the navigator telling him where to go. These dealers wanted a taste of Camel Trophy and they've got it.
No question about that, Jeremy. Your eyes don't deceive you. Our overall leaders from Denver East are navigating directly down a stream. We might call this orienteering on wheels, Bill.
Oh, that's right. Time, speed, distance rallying is different from a speed event. The idea here is to get from point A to point B, not in the fastest possible time, but at exactly the right time. These guys have been given an average speed of 9 miles an hour, and their route instructions are little diagrams that sort of replicate the intersections that they see there in the woods. And they're not exactly easy to spot, especially when you're trying to stay on time and read an odometer.
Yeah, just turning on 4 right now. We're going to 4. We're going to 4. We're on 4.
There were 4 checkpoints along the way that they had to hit at exactly the right time. They were given a timeout from the prior one and then marked on the time into the next one, and any deviation from exactly the right speed and they collect penalty points.
And as you can see, the terrain and the course route carefully selected to challenge the ability of the drivers and the capability of the vehicles.
There goes North Point again. These guys have the bit in their teeth. They're fighting off a challenge now by San Diego, Pioneer Centers of San Diego, that are ahead on points. And look what's happened.
Final results. Denver East picks up their second victory. San Diego second. They have been very consistent. North Point suffered a problem and dropped back to 5th.
That was a delicate piece of driving from the team from Denver East. You were really timing it down to the last second there.
Yeah, we picked up a little bit too much speed coming out of the mud bog, so we knew we were quite a bit ahead. So we tried to back off coming up the hill here, and we got pretty close to nailing it. So Craig did a great job. It was
he did
really good driving through the mud. Really good job.
Is this a harder course than the one they built for the trials last week?
Much more difficult. Much more difficult. I think it's much easier to get lost. I think we started 3rd and we were first ones across the finish line, and we doubled back across one team and watched another one go completely the wrong way. So it was much more difficult.
Some well-deserved high fives all around for Denver East. After a break, we'll be back to get set for the triathlon. Stay with us. Welcome back to Land Rover TReK 96. Bob Varsha along with Bill Baker and Jeremy Hart with you. Ready for our next test of man and machine? Well, in this case, it's mostly the men who will be tested as we prepare for the Solihull Cup Regatta.
Well, you may wonder where the word Solihull comes from, Bob. It's actually a little town in the Midlands of England where Land Rover vehicles are built. In this event, the teams have been asked to carry a canoe from their vehicles to the edge of a pond, stop, put on their life vests, and we were, again, very careful about safety here. They had to zip them up and make sure they were tied. Put the canoes in the pond and then do a lap of the pond to collect lug wrenches, bolts, and their tires.
And that tire and wheel combination is no lightweight item.
About 85 pounds. And in the trials, they carry the tire with them from the vehicle. In this championship round, the tires are floating between 2 log bridges.
See the teams approaching that float, grabbing for a plastic bag that contains the lug bolts.
There's Greg Weiler in the middle of the canoe. He's from Land Rover Denver East, and this is an interesting story. This 24-year-old parts manager is overcoming a heck of a fear of water because he can't swim.
Once again, the crews working amongst themselves.
David Crute from Land Rover North Point, the Englishman. We thought that the Canadians were going to be very strong here because they showed a lot of strength in canoe skills as a group during the territorial trials.
Now watch this struggle to get the tire and wheel into the canoe. Keep in mind, the swimmer cannot touch bottom here, so he is having to heft this thing out of the water with nothing to leverage himself against.
That's right. And look at that. That is really, really a lot of desire to make that thing happen like that. That's Brian Adams who hefted that combination up. There's Denver East, first to the shore. Matt Federico from Glen Cove diving in. He's a bodybuilder. I thought he was going to toss the tire into the canoe.
With all the subtlety we've come to expect from our friends at Glen Cove. And then once they are back on dry land, they have to remount the tire and wheel on the vehicle.
Right, get it just right and get the 3 lug bolts seated that they had to pick up. And then, of course, run another about a tenth of a mile and cross the finish line together.
This team from Denver East are on a roll. They've just won the canoeing. They won the 2 events previously. What is it, guys? What's the magic?
Desire, teamwork.
How much harder was today's canoeing than it was last week when you didn't have to pull that wheel out of the water?
Fair amount more difficult. Yeah, it took a lot more coordination, working together, keep the canoe in position. It took a lot.
Well, you can see the results of the planning. Another victory for Denver East, but the home favorites from North Point have a second-place finish, and they are moving up the points chart.
2, 1, go! All
right, let's go!
Now it's the start of the triathlon. They're going to be running, followed by mountain biking, followed by an alpine ropes course.
And wait until you see our little skywalk planned for these competitors. Here's an interesting element of the triathlon competition.
Yeah, how about trying to cross this rickety log bridge made out of pine poles supported by 50-gallon drums? And as I said earlier, Greg Weiler had to overcome that lack of swimming ability and a real fear of the water to do this, but it didn't stop him.
Finish line. Go.
See you at the finish line. That's Matt Federico as we prepare for the mountain biking portion of the competition. And once again, the terrain is your biggest enemy.
Well, these guys have gotten used to being off pavement. Now they're going to be off pavement on 2 wheels. It's kind of interesting to see whether they use the same kind of technique. First gear down, third gear up, I don't know. When all else fails, get out and push.
Now keep in mind, some of our competitors have fitness backgrounds that make them very able mountain bikers, while others, well, they might not have been on a bicycle since they were little boys.
That's right. They're more like me. They enjoy their sports on television and not participating.
We continue with the alternate transportation, the penultimate round of our competition. This is that skywalk I was telling you about, the ropes course.
This was set up by alpine experts brought over from France, led by a Frenchman by the name of Philippe Cornu and a Camel Trophy veteran, Eric Hussein. They do this kind of thing every day near Chamonix in France, and they set this course up on Little Creek Farms. There was a lot of trepidation for the people who had never used anything like this equipment. But again, they all hung in there and went for it.
As you can tell, a tremendous physical challenge.
Are you ready?
And here, perhaps, the most spectacular part.
Yeah, the zip run. What do we call this, zip cam?
Slide for life.
They hit speeds, I guess, about 20, 25 miles an hour before being brought up sharp by some elastic cords at the end.
As you can tell by that giggle, they had lots of fun doing it. Victory for North Point as they continue their assault on the lead. San Diego second, Denver East in third. We'll be back for more of Land Rover TReK 96 in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back to Little Creek Farms in Georgia, where Land Rover TReK 96 is about to reach its climax with our final event, and certainly the determining test of this championship, the test drive. Ever taken a test drive? Not like this one.
This is the last obstacle of the last event of today's Land Rover TReK 96. This is where the event will be decided. What they have to do are the 2 cars will be going at any one time, and they'll be competing against each other over a series of obstacles. Some very, very slippery slopes, which might need winching. Other very tricky obstacles, which are going to stress both the drivers and the cars to the limit. There are some obstacle posts as well, which if they hit those, that'll virtually knock them out of the running. Now, the cars and the drivers are already in a pretty bad state after a really heavy day of competition. They've been pushing themselves to the limit since way before dawn this morning. And the cars are covered in mud. The drivers are way down to their bottom levels of adrenaline. And it'll be the teams that manage to push through that that manage to get to the end the fastest that'll win today's Land Rover TReK 96.
All right, thank you, Jeremy. Now, this event will carry a 100-point bonus that could launch any of 4 teams, the exception being Lawrence Park, into our championship. Highlights of the early rounds of competition, Lawrence Park against Glen Cove.
Lawrence Park from Toronto, Canada. Not eligible on points now for the championship, but still wanting to do well in this event. Here's a left-hand turn with about a 30-degree slope, and look at that. They touched that bamboo pole, and that's a 60-second in-place penalty, which allows Glen Cove to move on to the next heat.
On to our preliminary Heat 2, San Diego versus Denver East, both in the running for the title.
Well, San Diego really wanted to pull through on this one because they're going against a sister store. Both Denver East and San Diego have the same ownership, and they both picked up penalties at the same place. Now, this air bridge requires you to get up on top, stop at just the right place, and then move the logs around for departure.
And that is exactly what did not happen right there, and they suffered the penalty.
Now, North Point going against a Camel Trophy bogey team. Since there were 5 competing teams, we wanted to have head-to-head competition for the stimulation, so there were some Camel Trophy veterans who kept the North Point guys honest.
And once again, a key point on the course was the air bridge. As they struggled for traction, they slipped off.
And look at that, and those were the pros who did that.
That was the Camel Trophy team. So it's down to Glen Cove, North Point, and Denver East. The 2 quickest times will advance to the final.
Well, here's Glen Cove going against the guys, the veterans from Camel Trophy, who are there just to keep the action going. Glen Cove being very smooth and moving into that final corral that they have to maneuver, and their time was quite good.
Then it was Denver East against North Point, numbers 1 and 2 in points coming into this final event.
Some serious competition here. Only 20 points separate the two. They're both in the corral at the same time. What's going to happen?
Watch the near lane as Denver East trying to get the vehicle turned as quickly as possible. There you see Greg Winch bending over. They've been called for a touch.
Oh, Greg is heartbroken here. I mean, these guys went in with that 20-point lead, and that allows North Point to move ahead into the final round.
So our championship final pits Glen Cove against North Point. May the better team win.
All right, here we go. Articulation Alley as they count down for the start. They've got 8.5 inches of ground clearance underneath those differentials, and if they hit them too hard, it can slow you up.
And we're off. North Point on the right, Glen Cove on the left.
There you are through Articulation Alley. You don't want to go too fast here because you can get the wheels in the air and lose a little bit of control. You've got to stop before you get across TReK Trench to get across those lashed logs. You've got to have somebody out directing you.
Well, that looks like pretty good speed right there.
They are head-to-head right now. They can't touch any of the logs or the poles, or it's a 60-second in-place penalty.
And those poles have to be replaced, as you see, after the vehicle passes through. Now the berm.
Get back in. They got to get back in. They got to get belted up, and they got to make this berm without touching anything. This has been a bugaboo.
No reverse. Just look at the car. Okay, you got it. Straight. Keep going.
Very carefully got around there.
Okay. Even though we took a little extra time.
All right, there's North Point first into the mud pit. And look, there goes Glen Cove. Look at, they touched that, they touched the pole in the back, but the judge didn't see it.
No signal from the judges. Oh, they may have dodged a bullet right there as they head for the mud pit.
And I want to catch up now, but uh-oh, look at that. Oh, they went too hard and they knocked down the log barricade in the mud bridge, and that's going to be 60 seconds right there. So they cheated death and then picked it up again.
Call it poetic justice. Now the bar replaced behind the North Point side.
Right.
Now they will try to scale this hill. Of course, they can't do it in the mud. They're going to need to be ready to use that winch.
Well, that's the objective. This is about a 45-degree slope, and the idea is to hit it as hard as you can to get up as far as you can before you unload and unwind that winch. The team, this calls for teamwork. One member has got to clean off the winch, pull it out, while the other one gets the tree strap and the D-shackle and places it on the winching pole.
The winch is operated by the driver using a hand control.
You can imagine how Kevin Sweeney from Glen Cove is feeling now with that 60-second penalty, watching as North Point pulls way out in front.
Glen Cove has to hope something happens to North Point, but they appear to be working well together, and you see the judges standing at the top of the berm watching everything intently.
And very carefully right now. This is an area that there's no room for fooling around or letting the heat of competition let you make a mistake, because that winch has a 9,000-pound capacity, and if you get your hands too close to it, well, you can imagine what might happen.
And now perhaps the most delicate operation of all, the driver applying the right amount of throttle in the proper gear while the winch does its work.
That's right. The judges will make them stop and back up if that winch cable isn't rewound and respooled correctly. If it's a rat's nest, they'll stop and have to unwind it and back up again. They've learned that lesson by this point. That's Paul Seaman behind the wheel. He's a sales specialist at North Point.
That was Joe Rich, general manager of the North Point Center.
And now Phil Schaff is driving for Glen Cove, trying to close the gap. I'd guess there's about a 30-second separation now, so they have picked up some time.
Now here's the air bridge that caused so much problems in the preliminary rounds, and they've dropped one of the logs.
Oh, yeah, you've got to have teamwork here. They've got to work together. The correct technique is to have these logs in place for getting up on the air bridge, going just far enough. They've gone too far. Oh, that's tough. That's tough.
Now, they haven't fallen into the hole. They're going to try to back
they did. They just did. Well, there it is. If you come off the clutch without having the handbrake set, you were going to go forward. He tried to back up, but didn't have it squared away. So Kevin Sweeney now, with the help of Bob Burns, the event director, is going to have to pry those front wheels up and come into the off-ramp there. But the time now is it's going to be hard to make it up unless North Point has a disaster.
Here's North Point in the corral that caused Denver East such heartbreak.
Oh, that was a heartbreaker. They've got to do a multi-point turn. It's not so hard to do, except that it's hard to do it cleanly, smoothly, and quickly.
Now, that wasn't a touch. That's the driver's crewman beating on the car to tell him when to hit the brakes.
Right. David Crute there watching as they exit. Has to replace the barricade. Paul Zeman now slipping to the back seat because they have another driver change here. And that's Brian Adams jumping into the driver's seat.
Once again, buckle up all around before you're allowed to move on.
Mark McDonald, the judge. He's our Camel Trophy emergency medical technician. Okay, now they're approaching another lash log incline. We've seen vehicles slip off these earlier this week, Bob, when the tires are caked with mud.
Momentum is everything. Beautifully done right there.
Yeah, no problem there. Oh, look at, here's Glen Cove still working on the air bridge, and the exhaustion showing.
You're the man, Brian.
Meanwhile, North Point has just one obstacle left.
Right, they're going down into the last trench, up and out, and the clock clicks, and there it is. They have won the TReK test drive and picked up 200 points.
And there is Joe Rich celebrating with his boys.
Well, they don't really know whether they've won overall at this point, but I think it's going to work out that they have.
We'll be back with more of Land Rover TReK final scores, and we'll meet our winner. Land Rover TReK 96 has been brought to you by Land Rover, the World 4x4. Victory in the final event, the test drive for Land Rover North Point, brings with it a 100-point bonus. As a result, they are the winners of Land Rover TReK 96 over a terrific effort from Denver East and Glen Cove, the other two teams in our final bracket.
Home team from Atlanta, the winners of Land Rover TReK 96. Congratulations. Did you think at the beginning today that you could do it?
I don't know. It's a lot of tough competition and just a lot of hard work and dedication from all of us.
That was tough. Do you have a high point of the day that'll stay with you for a while?
Right here. Right here.
That was very exciting, yeah. Yeah, we were going for it then.
What about the competition? How tough was it?
They were awesome. Those guys from Denver East were awesome. These guys from Glen Cove, everybody here was good, you know. Everybody was awesome. So we're psyched.
Now, this was the toughest dealer competition in the world. How do you feel to have won?
Amazed. Yeah. Amazed.
And how do you think you would do against foreign teams if they came to join you?
Bring them down.
Bring it on.
Bring them down.
Let's go.
Bring them to my hometown.
Tomorrow. Let's do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Bring them down.
Congratulations once again from North Point in Atlanta, Georgia, the winners of Land Rover TReK 96.
All right, thank you, Jeremy Hart. Well, a lot of elation and a lot of exhaustion there among our winners from Land Rover North Point. 12 hours of hard mental and physical labor in some of the most extraordinary automotive products in the world. And Jeremy raises a good point there, Bill Baker. How about an international competition, not just a North American competition in 97?
I think there's a real good chance when this event is seen by the Land Rover operations in Japan and Australia, in Germany, in Italy, in Spain, and in England. I think they'll want to be here with bells on.
That would be great fun, not only to see if they can walk the walk and talk the talk, as it were, but to see if they have the spirit, exemplified by Denver East, who won the Team Spirit Award this weekend.
And took away Camel Trophy watches for it. This was because they showed the kind of inter-team support as well as encouragement to the other teams on the event as they went through that grueling 12-hour day.
To our winners from Land Rover North Point, a pair of tickets each on Virgin Atlantic Airways to London.
And all of the teams will take away a lifetime experience and something that not enough people in life, I think, get a chance to do, and that is get a measure of yourself.
Certainly everyone back at the home dealerships will want to know everything that happened here in Georgia, and we're glad you could be with us. I'm Bob Varsha for Bill Baker and Jeremy Hart. So long from Little Creek Farms in Social Circle, Georgia.